Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about the importance of the non-verbal in presentations. Now when I say non-verbal, I'm not talking about things that don't come from your mouth, although that's part of it. I also want to talk about what causes communication. I've talked about this in a video before, but communication works like this. I'm thinking of a blue car. I want someone else to be thinking about the same blue car. So if I'm thinking about a Volkswagen Beetle and my audience is thinking about a Maserati, well, there's a disconnect there. I have not communicated it. So I want them to have the same blue Beetle in their head. How do I cause that communication to happen? I have to use the means at my disposal. It can be writing. It can be talking. It can be gestures. It can be whatever I choose, whatever is most appropriate for communicating with that audience. But I want to communicate. I want the same idea in my head to be in my audience's head. We can find lots of studies that talk about the words that you use. I can speak to someone and the actual words that I use mean something. They are meaningful. It's also meaningful how I say the word. I can say one word, walk, walk. And I can say it like this, walk. I can say it like this, walk. I can say it like this, walk, walk. Whatever I choose, the meaning can change. So people have done studies about this and they've tried to determine how much is the actual word that is said and how much is the way it is said, the inflection that's put upon it. And they've determined things like 55% of meaning is determined through the way the word is said, the inflection, the vocal quality. The studies really aren't conclusive because they've been done with things like one word, walk. But normally these things have context around them. There are people involved and they know the situation that's going on. So the context becomes really important. You can't take it out of context. Normally we don't just have one word. We have entire phrases or sentences. So imagine this situation.
My wife walks in. She's carrying about a bag of groceries and I say, "You went to the store." She's just going to look at me and probably walk on. But what if she comes home, she's carrying a bag of groceries, and I say, "You went to the store?" Well, then I'm going to expect a different response. She's going to somehow acknowledge me. But if she comes home and I say, "You went to the store?" Well, then, she's going to storm out and probably divorce me.
So the actual words may not change, but the meaning changes completely. Communication is not just about the words, it's about how the words are said.
To demonstrate this point about the importance of how words are said, we're going to look at one of the best comedies ever made, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Now, you may recognize this guy. This is Stein. He's pretty famous. He was a speechwriter and advisor to a few presidents, and he had his own game show. Pretty cool guy. Now, here he is playing a economics teacher, and he is trying to explain something to the class. But the problem with what he's saying is that no one can understand him. The actual words he's saying are just fine, but it's the way he's saying it. So let's listen.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression.
We're going to pause it right there because we need to try to figure out what's going on here. Most of us feel like this girl at this point. We do not remember what Stein just said. We remember the actual words, but how many of us could answer his question? He asked a question, but we didn't even know he asked a question until he said, "Anyone? Anyone?" He went up a little in his inflection when he said, but we weren't prepared for it. we had to remind ourselves of what he just said. In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the anyone, and we have to repeat the question because we didn't realize it was going to be a question. He's speaking monotone.
Passed the anyone?
He's still asking
The
questions.
tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered, raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects?
Look,
It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Speaking in that kind of monotone, like Ben Stein, means that we find the presentation boring. But why? What's the relationship between finding it boring and not being able to understand it? Now, sure, part of the audience may just fall asleep because they're tired, and we can't really help that. But for most of us, we find his lecture so boring because we can't follow what he's saying, because of how he says it. The way the words are said actually determines how much we understand, even. Speaking monotone like that means that we can't follow it, and that makes it boring, and that makes us say, that person is terrible. Inflection keeps us on track so we can follow the meaning. Watch that video again.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the anyone, the Great Depression, passed the anyone, a tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered, raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Can you explain what voodoo economics is? Seriously, can you? The reason why most of us have trouble explaining it is because we had trouble following him. Combine inflection with pauses so the audience can breathe and understand, take time to understand what you're saying, and the audience will follow along right there with you. But if you don't do those things, the audience will lag behind. They won't be able to follow you. The other part of communication, besides inflection, that's nonverbal, that aids or hurts communication, is gestures. Gestures. They play a large role. We can determine meaning through gestures often. Gestures. Now, if you go on YouTube, you can find a lot of videos about how to catch people lying. One of the things they point to that you can tell someone's lying is the shoulder shrug. Watch a certain presidential candidate talk about how he didn't cheat on his wife, and he gives the shoulder shrug. He says, "I've never cheated on my wife."
I have no idea what you're asking about. I've responded to consistently to these tabloid allegations by saying I don't respond to these lies. And
There, did you see it? He says, I don't respond to these lies, and his shoulders go up just a little. It's almost imperceptible. His shoulders go up when he says it.
Why does he do that? Why does the shoulder shrug come into play with that statement? Well, the shoulder shrug says, I don't know, or I can't verify what I'm saying. The shoulder shrug. It helps determine meaning. Now, let's watch one of my favorite shows of all time, Seinfeld.
This is the one where Jerry starts to eat healthy. And so when they're at the diner in the morning, he doesn't order a donut or whatever, he orders a grapefruit. So they bring him a grapefruit cut in half, and he eats it with a spoon, and when he digs in, some pulp flies up and goes into George Costanza's eye. And he's blinded, he yells, pulp can move, baby. And for the rest of the day, he keeps winking at people. So in this scene right here, he is supposed to get a card signed by all of the New York Yankees. That's who he works for. And so the ball player has come in and asking for the card.
Have that for you right after lunch.
Fine, I'll be back after my massage.
Of course, your massage. Enjoy your massage. Like I'm gonna risk my job with the New York Yankees to make a few extra bucks.
No, of course not.
Well, Mr. Weatherby.
Colonel, do you have that Yankee envelope?
I sure do.
Oh.
There you are.
Hey.
Think you're going to be very pleased when you see what's inside.
What is this?
Your cut of the loot? Stubbs gave me $200 for the autographed birthday card that was inside.
Who told you to sell the card?
You did.
No, I didn't.
Well, not in so many words, but I believe we had an understanding.
I was not winking, you idiot! That was the grapefruit! It's like acid! I need that card back. It's Mr. Steinbrenner's. I was responsible.
Well, Stubbs already sold it to some guy whose kid is in the hospital.
Well, get it back! It's very important!
Look, you want me to get it back or not?
Get it back!
So gestures can override the actual words that are said. That's why we say that the words that are said are only a small part of communication. The gestures can actually mean more than the words that are said. How does this work in business? Because obviously we don't live in the world of Seinfeld. It works in a few ways. Gestures can accentuate or repeat the words that are being said. They can be another means to communicate what's coming out of our mouths. So for instance, here's an example. I saw a group give a presentation, and this woman was describing how they were creating a LED ball, a sphere that had a lot of LED lights on it. And the sphere would spin very quickly, and the lights would flash in certain orders programmed by a computer, and it would show words on the ball. Whatever you programmed in, the lights would form those words by the very nature of spinning so fast. So she was describing this, and she was describing the sphere, and this was pretty early in the project. And she was talking about a sphere that was about a foot in diameter. But she kept making this gesture. So our sphere is about a foot in diameter. And I had a momentary fuzz listening to her. I thought, wait, she's talking about a sphere, but she's gesturing a cube. So eventually I realized she meant a sphere. But her gesture disoriented us. It was disconnected from the voice, from what she was saying. It did not accentuate, and it made me as the audience pause and wonder, what did she mean? The other way gestures affect presentations is about how we perceive the presenter. We may find things like rocking back and forth, jingling pockets, whatever. We may find that a little distracting, but we can get over that. But there are certain gestures that we know we don't like. Imagine the stereotypical used car salesman. You know what they look like. Imagine them. These people they do certain gestures in the stereotype version. They raise their eyebrows, and they come at you in a threatening way. So, you want to come on down? You want to do this? You want to buy a new car? What can I do to get you in a new car today? That's threatening. We perceive that person as lying and scheming to do whatever he can to make money from us. They're trying to steal from us. The gestures alert us to those things. That's what they're doing. It may not be the case, but the gestures are telling us that. The voice may be saying things that are perfectly reasonable, but the gestures make it so that it isn't. Now that does not mean we have to stand perfectly in place and not move. But it means we can appear calm. We can appear as if we want to communicate. We can smile. We don't have to raise our eyebrows or furrow them. We can just stand normal and talk to our audience. So I'm not saying you should practice your gestures. You really shouldn't. But we should think about them before we present. Or even as we're presenting, be aware what we're doing with our hands. Don't practice, but think of how you can gesture in ways that accentuate what you're saying from your mouth. And we do it automatically, without thinking. But the other part of gesturing is that we don't want to do the same gesture every time. We don't want to always. So, as I was saying before, we have a few different gestures, one of which is to do this with your hand. The other is to raise your hand like this. The other is to keep opening your hand each way. Try to make it varied. We don't want the audience to become conscious of our gestures. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation on the importance of the non-verbal or the non-words used during a presentation. Have fun presenting.